and it seems like most of you guys are hearing me fine. And I want to thank you guys for coming to this live stream. So pretty much we do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m. and that's -6 GMT. So pretty much if you're in Europe, it'll be about, I think it's 6 hours later. So it's probably around 8-ish. But yeah, this live stream is all going to be about shading black and white, which is this week's exercise. And originally it was a comment posted on our YouTube page. And I felt like this is something that a lot of people struggle with, not just this one person. So I wanted to just give some tips on the way I would go about shading black and white and some problems I see with people just starting out and how they shade black or white. So I'm going to go ahead and get that out of the way. And for my subject matter, I'm going to get through a few things. So first I'm going to draw some spheres just on black and white, an eyeball, and then finally an 8-ball. And if you read through the exercise, you'll see that I have this James Gurney example in this corner. And pretty much what he was trying to showcase is that... Oh yeah, if you want to follow along with this live stream, that would be awesome. I kind of want more of these to be like that, where it's less just watching me draw something and more of, I don't know, educational based. But okay, so in this example that James Gurney did, he was trying to point out that black and white doesn't always mean what we originally think of it, where black is this dark, like just completely void of color, and white is the complete opposite, where it's just extreme light. So in this example, pretty much what he was trying to show is that this checkerboard, there's like this light that's hitting it at different angles, and there's a shadow, obviously. And in the shadow, the white checker is this gray down here. And then in the light area where the light's hitting the checkerboard, the checker that's supposed to be black is actually pretty much the same color. And the point that he was trying to make is that it all depends on the lighting, and it's not so much the color, but the way that the color interacts with the light that's hitting it. So when you think about black and white, try not to think of definitive black and white, but rather think of it as just a darker palette versus a lighter palette. So I'm going to go ahead and hide that. And one of the examples that was already submitted to this week's exercise is this one right here. And this was done by Santi Perez, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. But the reason I wanted to show this is because they did such a good job at showing off how to shade black and white without making it feel like a base color of black or a base color of white. And the big thing that I really want to point out is on the white sphere. Like 90% of it is just a mix of different grays and some warm hues thrown in there as well. And the only thing that's close to the actual white color is the highlight that you see right here. Oop. And I think that's really important to note that whenever you're shading anything white, it's usually just a different shade of gray. And it just depends on how much variation there is depending on the light source that's in the scene. And for black, I think it's also important to note how there's different colors in here. Like in this section right here, you can definitely see some of those yellow hues just barely coming through, and then near the edge, you see more blue-gray hues coming through. And this is something that's important to note because even though the object is black, and you can tell that just from most of the object's identity seems to read as black, and then they mixed in these different colors to make the object more interesting and more appealing. And I think this is really important because I see a lot of people when they're drawing white or black, they'll literally grab the solid color white and a solid color black. And you can make this work. Like I've seen artists do different techniques where it does eventually get to a point where it looks nice when you start off with pure black or pure white, but I recommend avoiding using this technique because this can just lead to longer rendering times, and honestly it's more time consuming. And in digital art, you want to try your best to save the time that you have and use it efficiently. So what I'm going to do, actually that just looked like a face to me. I don't know if you guys can see it. That was unexpected. But yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how you could go about shading this black and white sphere without starting with a pure white or pure black. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this 8-ball. And then make a new layer. Okay. So what I'm trying to tell you, and got to keep pressing repeat on my music here, is when you're doing a white object, and you can imagine any white object, and there might be ones in the room around you right now. It could be like right now, Wes put a Xbox 360 on my desk, and it's supposed to be white, but from my view right now, it's actually a darker shade of gray. It's almost like a mid-tone gray because it's in shadow. So rather than picking pure white and being like, okay, this is the sphere I'm going to start off with, instead, you should start off with a more neutral base. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this dark gray with just a hint of the orange hue into it. And the reason I'm throwing some color into it is because I don't want it to just be a 100% grayscale, because even objects in real life usually have some variation of color within them depending on what scene the object is in. And I've argued with people that have just started off where they're like telling me, well, no, Tim, I want the hair to be white. I have to make sure it's white. And so they'll use only white, like pure white, to color in the entire hair. But really, that's not giving you a good sense of value or the way the lighting's hitting the character. But rather, you're just trying to show off that the hair is white. And you can do that with throwing in other colors as well. It's just something that you got to get used to practicing. So with this color being our base for our white object, from there I'm going to build it up then. And I'm going to use this slider gradient bar that I created just before the stream started. And pretty much what I was looking for something that read as different value scales, but also threw in just a hint of color. And just like the last live stream, to blend, I usually use a circle hard edge brush with just some spacing. But you can do this with any brush you want, and even if you wanted it to be more of a soft brush, you want more of a soft edge. But I like to have some of that brush edge work shown, and it just reads more as like a painterly style. So I kind of like the way that looks. So then after I apply my first kind of like base coating, and this is also something a technique called where, what is it? It's like you're building your color. I think it's value building, where you lay down like different values in order from the darkest to the lightest, and that'll build your values on whatever object you're creating. So after that first layer, I'm going to grab then this other white, which you can see even on the color picker is still not near that pure white. And the only thing that I would ever use a pure white for is like specular highlights. So you can see how you can build that really nice transition. And then finally, do one more, and you can see how I'm still avoiding that pure white. That's because, like I said, I'm only going to be using that for the actual highlights of the sphere. All right, so now we have a nice value buildup from on our sphere. So then what I'm going to do is now I'm going to grab that pure white, and I'm just going to lay in a highlight. And this highlight pretty much will define the object's material, because if I left it without a highlight, then the object itself is probably more of a matte material where it doesn't reflect light, it would absorb light, so it might be like fabric or something like that. But adding this highlight right here makes the surface almost like appear shiny or glossy. So I'm definitely changing the properties of the object. And you can do that with just this one single color and by how lightly you lay it on. So that's why for a while white was my favorite color to work with in digital art, because you could round something out or give it a property really, really quickly, and I really liked that. But I definitely see white being overused, and I know I definitely tended to do that, especially like on a person's face, where you have to remember that, even though white's like a quick way to round something out really quick, that doesn't mean everything needs to be showing value. Because on a person's face, I know that I was adding white a lot of places, but skin is a mixture of absorbing and reflecting light depending on like the oil the skin has on the face, or if you're sweating or something like that. And it's not like practical to have your whites all over the face when you're just trying to show off skin. So you definitely have to be careful not to overuse white, because then the skin will start to look glossy. I am using a brush with just a hard edge, so no texture, no nothing, just a simple circle hard edge brush. And usually with streams or tutorials, I try to work with just a circle brush, or even the chalk brush, just to show you guys that most drawings or paintings that can be done with just the simple brushes. And I try to reiterate that you don't need special brushes to create something awesome. All right, so now that we have our sphere in place, I'm just going to go ahead and create a quick little shadow, just so that this bottom doesn't appear like it's kind of melting into the actual background. There we go. This is definitely something that is important to know, to do when you're doing the eyes as well. So let me do a quick example of that. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this sphere in the corner. And you can see the difference as I put it close up to this pure white sphere or circle that I have. The difference between the two, and how one looks like an object and the other looks just like a white circle. But you can still see that this object pertains to be mostly white. How comes when you draw outside the sphere, only the sphere itself changes color? That's because I'm using layer masks, and if I open up my group again, so you can see on the layers themselves, I have 2 layer masks. And pretty much that will mask out whatever you have selected. And I have 2 tutorials on it, so if you want to check out on Concept Cookie and just type in masks in the search and you'll come across them. But I use masks a lot when I'm doing something just like this, where I don't want to go outside of the lines. I just want to stick inside of whatever I'm working on. All right. What was I? Oh, yeah, an eyeball. So let's see. Do I have any examples pulled up? Okay, yeah, I can use crystal. All right, so this is the low-res version. That's okay. Yeah, I guess I can use this. So even though this is really pixelated right now, the one thing that I just want to point out really quick before I get on to moving to the next thing is that the eyeball itself is like this low, almost skin color, so right here. And the only thing that I wanted to be almost pure white was the actual highlight in the specular. And it's easier to see on the high quality version. This one I'm kind of just zooming in on a close-up. But the specular should only be used on, since the eye itself has somewhat of a glossy appearance to it because it has that wet look. That's just the property of an eyeball. You can add that intense highlight. But if I did that on the skin, then it would almost make the skin look like it has that same property of being really reflective. But skin usually by nature is more absorbing in terms of light rather than reflective. But I just wanted to point out that the so-called whites in the eyes are usually a form of color that's more neutral based. So whether that's blue or in this case, it's more like of a tan neutral based. You want to avoid using pure whites to shading your eyeballs. Okay. So how do you get transfer brush dynamic? So if you open up your brush window, so all your windows, see these floating windows on the side? They can all be opened up with your window tab that's on the very top of your menu bar, and it's under brush. So then with the brush menu open, which is this far right one, you can see how transfer is checked. And to turn that on and off, you just check it. But if nothing happens when you check it, that's because on your opacity jitter, you want to make sure it has pen pressure selected. Because if it's off, you can see how no matter what, it doesn't have that nice gradient that it has when you turn the pen pressure on. And I also have my flow on too, so you can turn that to pen pressure as well. I really hope that you can get that to work and you can start understanding what's going on here. But yeah, the other thing that people usually turn on is shape dynamics, and that's when the harder you press down on the canvas, the more of that. Gotta turn it back on. So if I press really lightly, I'll get more of a smaller circumference, but then the harder I press, it gets larger, and you can see then we get to the full brush size. But I've grown to enjoy just having transfer on, but that, once again, is just personal preference, and it's something that you'll kind of figure out what you like to do. Okay, and then the next thing that I'm going to do is do a black sphere. So black is a little different than white because you can't choose a value darker than black, especially if you're using pure black. There's nothing darker. As you can see, I'm in the bottom left corner. But when I'm working with a black sphere, I'll still avoid working with pure blacks. And that's something that I've read from a few different artists, that you never want to use pure white or pure black because they aren't, it's not natural. They're technically man-made colors. So I'm going to go ahead and lay out this sphere. And you can see that these two spheres look like the same color, but this black, the one that I'm using for my example, is pretty much like an 80% black. It's not even pure black. So then we can go ahead and then work with that. Yeah, so I am using an English version of Photoshop, but I hope that you guys can kind of figure out what I'm doing in whatever language your Photoshop is in. Most of it's really basic, just like making new layers or using brush menu or using the brush tools. But I'm sure with the menus it gets a little confusing. But okay, so from here I'm going to go ahead and I made a new layer, and I'm going to mask out this black sphere that I have. And if you don't know how to mask out, once again, you can check out that tutorial and it'll go step by step on how to do that. Then I'm going to build up my values. Now what I don't want to do is just grab pure white and just start like building it out, because then I'm almost entering a toonish way of coloring black. And if we're going for something that's more, I don't want to say realistic, because sometimes it might just be more of a gradient of a grayscale in real life, but something more tangible, so something with a little more color into it. So I'm going to start building up this color using the slider bar on the right, and you can see how it adds just a little bit more than if I was just using pure white. There's something more to it. So the shortcut for the mask, there's two ways that you can do it. You can either hold Control and then click, or is it? No, it's Option, and if you click on the layer, it's like if you click on the line just below the layer, but above the layer you want to mask out. That's the shortcut for masking, but the long way is when you literally select the layer and then choose the square with the circle in the middle. But once again, I don't want to go through masking because I feel that tutorial that was created was meant for that, and I definitely think you should check it out because masking is something I use a lot, especially when doing stuff like this. Yes, Concept Cookie does have a YouTube channel. So if you just type in Concept Cookie, I'm pretty sure you should be able, it'll be one of the first videos. And on our YouTube channel, we post all of our free tutorials and usually the live streams or time lapses that we do. All right, so now if I turn that layer on and off, you can see how the values are starting to build from it, and now it's starting to round out. So I'm going to do it one more time. And then you can see the color that I'm choosing isn't even near white. It's like halfway on our value scale, and it has that orange color thrown in there. So I'm making my brush size smaller, and I'm building out my values again. And a lot of people ask me what opacity do I keep it at, and I usually keep it at 100% opacity, but then just press really lightly on the tablet to build up my values. But that's another one of those things where, you know, it's just personal preference, and if you like having the opacity set at like 50 and then you can push harder on the tablet, that's definitely up to you. Does it have to be orange? No, absolutely not. I'm pretty much basing this on as if it had like some of like a yellow light hitting it. So if you kind of understand like if there's warm or cool lights that hit an object. So let's say that there was more of a cool light that was hitting this black sphere, then I would be using more of blue hues to be integrated into the sphere rather than orange. But this orange will give it just that slight sense of warmth to it. Because when I work with color, I try to either have it be more either on the cool side or warm side, or have there be a nice mix to complement each other. What would be the difference between opacity and flow? So if I go to my transfer, okay, let's say that I turned opacity off. You can see how I still get some, actually it'll only show in here. I still get some of that opacity, but flow, yeah, exactly. Flow is like the spacing. And then opacity is literally adding the opacity of the brush. So the harder you press, you get 100% opacity, and the lighter you press, you get, you know, near like 10, 15% opacity. All right, so right now our object is looking like a matte object. So it's like it's absorbing most of the light. Now let's say we wanted to change that from an object that absorbs light to an object that reflects light. You can do that really quickly with adding our specular. Now for our specular, I am going to go for more of a close, I'm going to go close to that pure white, but like I said, I try to avoid using pure white and pure black, so I'm just getting close to it. Then I'm going to make my brush size really small, and this will indicate the direction that the light source is hitting this object the strongest. I'm going to lay it right on there. So you can see, even as I lay that on, it's like the entire surface just became glossy, like the object itself became glossy. Then when I turn it off, it becomes more of like a matte-looked object. Yeah, so if you're using a mouse, it won't recognize opacity. You have to do it with a tablet. Yeah, so if I turn that on and off, you can definitely see the difference that that makes. All right, and then just like we did with the white sphere, I'm just going to copy over that shadow and place it under this one so I don't have to remake it. And I know you're thinking, oh, the shadow's really easy to make, why don't you just recreate that really quick? But I've gotten so used to the habit of when I make things, if I can reuse it, I do, if possible, because it'll just make your time, it's more efficient and like time saving, I want to say. And especially when you have like 3 things you need to draw for the day, you definitely want to be very concerned with, okay, how long is this taking me? Are there any shortcuts I can take without cheating, and when I say cheating, I mean you can't just take an image off the internet and call it your own. You still have to create something. That's why we're concept artists. And there we go. So the last thing that I'm going to do for the stream is I'm going to go ahead and then use these techniques to lay it out on my 8-ball that I have. So let me put this in the corner as well. Do you have a 3D printer? Yeah, just send over a tablet that way. All right, so here's our 8-ball. And the main reason I chose this is because it's a good demonstration of a specular black object that also has white integrated into it. And I'm not going to be using pure white for the white part at all. I'm only going to be using the pure white, or almost pure white, for the specular. So what I'm going to do is, since I have the 8-ball already sketched out, I usually like to make a new layer then underneath of it, and this is usually the case if I have something already sketched out. Rather than working over it, I'm going to work under it first. So now I'm going to erase a lot of that extra that I had on the original drawing. And there's our base. So the example that I was trying to show with the black and the white with the red X's on top of it is that I'm not going to be using pure black or pure white to create this 8-ball, which is made up of a black and white, you know? So from here, I'm going to go ahead and just build the values just like we did earlier, but I'm going to avoid using pure black or pure white. Because when everyone thinks 8-ball, they definitely think black and white object. So if you're wondering how I'm doing my blending, this was done in our live stream last week, but pretty much it's a lot of picking up the color with Alt, which brings up my color picker, changing the size of my brush, and then laying down the color, and pretty much just doing that process over and over and over again. Oh, it seems you guys are telling me that it has stopped temporarily. Let me know as soon as that goes back on. You're just blacked out with a white specular. That's pretty good. So it appears that it works again? Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So I didn't really do much while the stream was out, but pretty much I'm just continuing building up those values. And thank you guys for being so on top of it. Otherwise, I would have just kept going, and I would not have known that I was just talking to myself. Yeah, there is still a bit of a lag from the time that I see the chat to the guy from the time that you hear me. All right, so you can start to see our 8-ball starting to round out here. You can see for the pure white, or I'd do that. This isn't pure white, so this is what I don't want to see, is pure white being laid out where the logo of the 8-ball is going to go. Because if we want to do this more realistically, we're going to be thinking about the light source and how the light source is hitting this object. And obviously, unless if that one little section of the ball was like a light in itself, so it was like creating that bright white, there's no way it would be that intense bright white. So yeah, when this is all finished, this will be uploaded onto YouTube. So if you want to watch it, or if this is like the live stream itself plays during a time that is really bad for you in your time zone, yeah, you can definitely check out all of the streams on our YouTube page. All right, so now on the actual white part itself, I'm thinking about, okay, the light source is hitting strongest about here. So then everywhere else, it's pretty much going to like gradient out around the entire sphere itself. Because working with spheres are really easy because you know exactly how much tonal contrast you can put on the object and where the shadow and light is going to pretty much be produced. That's funny. Yeah, originally I was going to do a magic 8-ball, but I thought it would be just easier to do just a pure black and white object rather than try to mix in that blue dye that it has inside of it, because I didn't want to confuse anyone with that. This is just a pure black and white object. All right, so now I'm going to get into my next layer of shading. And it's pretty much just building up those values one more time. So I'm grabbing near the top bars of each of the colors from the white and the black. I'm just laying it on. Yeah, so I'm not putting on a layer mask on this because I'm being pretty cautious of going on the inside, but this is an example of where a layer mask would come in handy if I needed it, which I probably will do at the end. All right, now at this point, I'm going to put on the highlights. Now this is where I am going to grab a color that is closer to pure white, and you can see how it'll just completely round it out right away. So we said that the light source was hitting somewhere around here really strong. Go ahead and build that out. Now, usually with something that's so reflective like a pool ball, you'll usually want to reflect some of the environment in the actual surface itself. So usually, okay, let's imagine that this ball was on the table. I have to be thinking about, okay, there's probably more than one light source. Maybe one's farther away. Just make that more diluted. And in cases like this, it's usually easiest to take a picture of an environment and literally do like, well, not of an environment, usually of like a pool hall or a basement where a pool table's in, and then take that picture and then overlay it on top of the sphere itself, and then do some warping and make it fit the actual sphere, and then just turn the opacity down, and that'll give you that nice reflective surface of the sphere itself. And it's a good way to get used to integrating pictures into your concept pieces. Because let's say there was another ball on the table itself. This is where it becomes a little more confusing, because then you have to think about how that would work on the surface of this sphere. So I'm not going to get too complicated, but you can get really in-depth with how much detail you're putting on your piece. But I'm going to leave it pretty simple, because otherwise I'm going to be rendering for like another 20 minutes more than the stream needs to go. And another thing I should be doing is I should actually write on the letters of the 8 ball. So really carefully, I'm just going to write my 8. All right, so now what I'm going to avoid doing is making it this pure black, because you can see how that stands out and doesn't really fit the rest of the object. And that's because the 8 itself is printed on the ball. So the 8 is still going to get some of that lighting shown on top. So what I'm going to do is I'm just grabbing my eraser tool and I'm pretty much just fading out from where the light source is the strongest directly on top of the 8 and erasing some of it. You can see how that fits much more better than it did before. So, okay, the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to merge all these layers together. So our 8 ball is on one layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my circle selection tool, move it on top of the 8 ball. Now I'm going to inverse the selection, so rather than selecting everything inside of the circle, it's going to select everything outside of the circle on that layer. And I'm literally just going to press delete. And what that'll do is it'll give me that nice, crisp, smooth edge to a sphere. And then from there, if I wanted to, I can make a shadow really quick. Make a new layer underneath. And since the lighting is more from the front, I'm going to go ahead and make that shadow be pushed behind the object. Like that. And then if you definitely think it's still too neutral in colors all around, something that I normally do for near the very end of my pieces is I'll usually add a levels. And pretty much if you open your levels from image adjustment levels, you can pretty much adjust the slider bars. So in this case, if I move the left one, you can see how my darks get darker. And then if you move the right one, your lights get lighter. And the middle one is like a kind of like a transition on where you want your mid tones to be. So I'm going to change mine to about here. Choose OK. And if you do Control Z, you can kind of see the difference in the contrast that it gives you. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this stream. But pretty much from here, then you could do other cool tricks. So, or maybe I'll show you guys something. So let's say. Say you wanted to show another pool ball. You can see how easy you can just add it up by masking it out and then just turning down the opacity so it's not so intense or like demands your attention. And then if you wanted to, then you could just literally draw the ball nearby. I guess it wouldn't be that close. It'd be like farther away. But then, yeah, then you can kind of create a whole new realm of realism based on the scene that you're creating and the reflection in the material. But the stream was mostly to focus on shading black and white objects. So I hope you guys can kind of understand that when you're shading black and white, you don't want to use pure black or pure white. You want to kind of think about the direction of lighting and how that lighting's hitting the object. And is the lighting warm? Is it cool? And that'll, add more like yellow tints or more blue hints. tints. And, I do have, so the other example is for hair. I have this picture, and I see a lot of people that, for white hair, they literally just choose white and they go at it. But you can see how it doesn't fit the rest of the value transitions that we have on the skin. So where the skin gets darker, the hair should also have a transition as well, in value, I should say. So then from here, I need to build up those darker values to really make it look like the head's rounded out. Because even though the hair is white, depending on the way that the light's hitting it, the shadow will make it appear to be more of a shade of gray. If you started erasing the ball and not your 8, it's probably because your ball and the 8 are on the same layer. So to change that, you have to make a new layer before you make the 8. This is Storm from the X-Men. But you can see even with the comic book style is a little different because they do work with more like two-tone coloring or two-shade coloring, which is where they'll use one for their base color and then another for their shadows. So usually they will play off of more pure colors for their midtones, but their shadow colors will still have a value to it. So it won't just be pure white. So even for Storm, for X-Men, we'll have grays to represent her shadows. But enough about comics. I want to thank you guys for coming to the stream. We do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m., and that's -6 GMT. And usually the topics are decided that morning on Facebook, and I'll post them on our Facebook, Twitter, DeviantArt to let you guys know what we're doing and what time. And they're usually done on the exercise that's in the works that week, but it varies from week to week. And like for next week, I don't know what we're going to be doing, but probably something Halloween related, maybe a fun one, maybe like we did with the vampire. So I want to thank you guys for coming to the stream. I hope you check out what's going on the site right now. So we got a Halloween contest, and there's been a lot of entries so far. So I'm really excited to look through them all and see you guys created. And then lastly, just know, I guess for like what's coming up on Concept Cookie, I've been working on an entire color palette. So if you see these swatches right here, it's still in progress, but it's one of those things where I don't want to just create a collection of colors and then pass them off. I want to actually test them out and see if there's something that I find viable and usable. And the other thing is I'm doing a full blood tutorial, so I'll take you guys through step by step on how I create blood with colors and the thickness of the blood and how it's different than other liquids, so things like that. And yeah, thank you guys for commenting, and I do take requests. So if you want to maybe leave a comment on the Facebook page under the picture that I'll post in like a half hour, then that would be great, and maybe then we'll take your suggestion into next week. But here we go. I'm done rambling about random things. I want to thank you guys for coming to the stream, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.